For the first time in 40 years, Washington ruled the football world, and the NFL's Coach of the Year, Joe Gibbs, gladly shared the glory with an entire city.
I don't think today could be a greater testimony to the fact that there's no other fans in the world that would come out on a day like this.
Believe it or not, but the now mediocre at best Washington Commanders used to be the dominant powerhouse of the National Football League. In under a decade, from the 1982 to 1991 NFL seasons, the then known as Washington Redskins had won 4 NFC Championship titles and 3 Super Bowls. Under the ownership of Jack Kent Cooke and head coach Joe Gibbs, Washington was unstoppable. Fans would pour into RFK Stadium to watch the team play. Parades of people would flood the streets of DC after every game. Fans would wait decades to become season ticket holders, with queues as long as 45,000 fans. It was a great time to be a fan. Clearly, something has changed in DC. In just a few years, the Commanders have somehow managed to have the least average attendance per game in the whole NFL during the 2022 season. That's right, dead last, even behind the worst of teams. The fans just aren't excited to watch a team that doesn't win. It's been 18 years since Washington has even won a playoff game. So how does a dynasty like this fall from the greatest to the worst? What happened in DC? After 24 years of ownership under Dan Snyder, the team has seen 10 head coaches and 28 different starting quarterbacks. So many professionals have come and gone, but amid all the chaos, one constant has remained: Snyder. There seems to be no other place left to point the finger than at the source, the man in charge of it all, the owner. So why is it that everybody blames Snyder? What exactly did he do wrong? Is he really the awful human being that everybody makes him out to be? We're going to examine Daniel Snyder's controversial legacy left on the Washington Redskins / football team / Commanders, with decisions he made with players, coaching staff, money, the loyal fans, and even inappropriate, harmful sexual behavior. Snyder grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. His dad, Gerald, was a freelance writer, and Snyder didn't grow up with much financial wealth. But his dad introduced him to football, and more importantly, the Redskins.
He's going to go all the way, unless Blackwood can catch him, and he can.
They didn't have much, not even a TV to watch the games, but they had a love for the team. Snyder said, "We didn't have any money. There were times when my father and I walked down the street to the TV store to watch Redskin games." He never even dreamed of owning the Redskins as a kid, probably because it didn't seem feasible. But he was perfectly content with listening to them play on the radio or on the hard-to-come-by TV whenever the opportunity presented itself. Snyder grew his wealth quickly after dropping out of college. There were some hard times early on, but by the age of 33, his marketing and communications company, Snyder Communications, was making $1 billion in annual revenue as of 1998. He was good at growing his enterprise and was a winner in the world of business, even being the youngest owner of a New York Stock Exchange company. He didn't like to lose, and he didn't lose very often. In the fall of '98, the Washington Redskins went up for sale following the death of the then owner, Jack Kent Cooke. Snyder jumped at the opportunity to purchase the team. Something that once was an inconceivable dream to a young boy, all of a sudden was now within his abilities. This was a chance of a lifetime. His dad was ecstatic at the idea of his son owning the Washington Redskins, and this made Snyder want the team even more. Once the NFL owners met and approved Snyder's purchase of the team, the first thing Snyder did was call his father and share his exciting news. "Dad, we got it."
This is my lifelong passion, and I'm fulfilling my dream and opportunity of a lifetime.
Snyder's first season as owner in 1999, the team looked good. Going 10-6, winning the NFC East, and even winning a playoff game. But see, Snyder didn't have a chance to make his mark on the team yet. Though many people were excited for the new owner's success, he didn't truly make his first moves as the general manager until the postseason. Let's take a look at those acquisitions right before the start of the 2000 season. Mark Carrier, a veteran safety entering his 11th season and unable to tackle anyone without making helmet-on-helmet contact. With the newer NFL rule, this was a 15-yard penalty and often resulted in suspension or fines. That was his last season in the NFL. Jeff George, a quarterback that got a 4-year, $18.25 million contract. He ended up playing 6 games and going 1-5 after the starter Brad Johnson had got injured. He got cut after 2 games the next season. His final game as a Redskin and as an NFL player would be an embarrassing 37-0 loss to the Packers on Monday Night Football. Adrian Murrell rushed only 20 times while at Washington for a whopping 50 yards and was gone after the 2000 season. Bruce Smith, the only one on this list that actually made a decent impact on the team, had 10 sacks in 2000 and really was hanging on just for the all-time sack record, which he got in 2003.
3 sacks, first 3 sacks games in September of '96.
And finally, the one who is always talked about, the big name, the defensive back Deion Sanders.
You can't just say I'm the best thing since peanut butter and jelly. I mean, you got to say I'm the best thing since peanut butter and jelly.
Given a 7-year, $56 million contract, he had a decent year in Washington with 41 tackles and 4 interceptions. But clearly, he was not the same player that he had once been. He retired after the 2000 season.
Watch it again, right off his face mask. In primetime.
Meanwhile, after the 2000 season, Brad Johnson, the injured quarterback, was released as a free agent from Washington. He was picked up by the Buccaneers, who he would take to win the Super Bowl just 2 years later. Before the season, the 2000 Redskins were many analysts' top pick to win the Super Bowl, but they didn't even make the postseason. This overview of his first season was just the beginning and a kind of foreshadowing of all the poor decisions that Snyder would make. He was used to the world of business where he could throw money at a problem or acquire a company to grow his wealth. Clearly, acquisitions in the NFL are different from acquisitions in business. NFL players age, and no matter how many millions of dollars you give them, it cannot fix how well they play. And more importantly, it cannot be a long-term solution to building a quality team. In 2001, Snyder hired head coach Marty Schottenheimer, who fought for control over the team the whole season with Snyder, and in the end, Schottenheimer ended up fired. Snyder brought in University of Florida head coach Steve Spurrier in 2002. He accepted a 5-year, $25 million contract with Washington, which was the highest amount for any coach ever in NFL history. On December 30th, 2003, and after 2 seasons of mediocre performance, Spurrier resigned from Washington, leaving $15 million still owed to him on the table. NFL coaches don't just step away like that. The problem points back, as it always seems to, at Snyder. You see, in the first season, Spurrier signed his 2 Florida quarterbacks, Daniel Werfel and Shane Matthews. Meanwhile, Snyder had pushed to draft rookie quarterback Patrick Ramsey. Spurrier did not want to start Ramsey, but by the 4th game, Snyder had won the battle and Ramsey was playing. By the next season, Coach Spurrier's choice at QB, Daniel Werfel, had been released. Spurrier said, "The owner and the personnel guys, they picked the team. I couldn't even pick the quarterback the second year, so I knew it wasn't going to work. I went to the team that offered the most money instead of the best situation. I did a lousy job. The GM did a lousy job. He happened to be the owner, so who needed to go?" With another coach gone, this ushered in the return of Joe Gibbs. Gibbs was a mastermind. He won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. He was already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at the time of his return, and he is now regarded as one of the greatest coaches of all time. If anyone could fix Washington, it was him. Snyder hoped, and the fans hoped too. Gibbs' second stint is different from any of the coaches that have come through Washington in the last 24 years. There's not much indication that Snyder and Gibbs argued or butted heads during their 4 years together. Gibbs said, looking back on the experience, "When I was there, Dan did every single thing he could to help us win and was never in any way an interference. I think if there's one person in the world that Snyder would never disrespect, it is Gibbs. This was the guy that his dad admired and someone who Snyder looked up to dearly. But yet, the team was clearly not brought back to its glory days, even under the reins of a world-class coach. The team did better under Gibbs, but a Super Bowl was still very distant. If we take it by the numbers, Washington under Gibbs was the best the team ever did under the Snyder regime. They won a playoff game in 2005, which, by the way, is the last time Washington has won a playoff game. And he got them 2 winning seasons. There were only a total of 6 under Snyder, and that's counting the first 1999 season, where Snyder just walked in without any changes to the team yet. So if you don't count that, Gibbs has provided Washington with 2 of the 5 winning seasons under Snyder in just his 4 short years. Gibbs just did the best he could with what he was given, and apparently with a Snyder-owned team, the best you can do is a single playoff win. Looking at what other coaches have done under Snyder, the pattern reveals itself. They all do worse. Riviera and Schottenheimer's win percentage both dropped over 10%. Shanahan's and Gibbs both dropped over 20%. And then you'll notice Turner there at the top. He actually had a 10% increase in his win percentage, but we talked about that 1999 season already and how it doesn't really count. Plus, Snyder fired him anyway, so there's a clear disconnect between Snyder's decisions and the team winning. In the same post that showed this chart on hogshaven.com, the author Matt Imbris-Vegas said, "Scientists have a principle known as Occam's razor, which is used to decide between competing explanations put forward to explain the same set of phenomena. Occam's razor states that the simplest explanation which can account for all observations is preferred, until facts are uncovered which require a more complicated explanation. On one hand, we have Riviera failed because of X, Gruden failed because of Y, Shanahan failed because of Z, Gibbs failed because of Q, Scott McLaughlin failed because of R, and so on. On the other hand, we have the simple explanation that, through his mismanagement, Dan Snyder created the conditions which prevented even accomplished football executives and coaches from succeeding." Once Gibbs retired, Snyder and his buddy Vinny Serrato, who served as executive vice president and general manager, had troubles finding anyone who would want to work under him. Washington resorted to the default option of hiring Jim Zorn as head coach because he was the offensive coordinator at the time. After 2 abysmal seasons, finishing 4th in the division in 2009, Snyder decided it was time to move on from head coach Zorn, and Serrato resigned. Snyder said, "The general manager needs to prevent the owner from hiring someone who's not qualified, and that's why Serrato is no longer here." Maybe Serrato had been the problem the whole time, and the team could start to improve from here. Some believe that this could be an upward turn for the team, but oh how wrong they were. The next coach through Washington was Mike Shanahan, a 3-time Super Bowl champion, and he agreed to come in on the conditions that him and Bruce Allen, the general manager, would be able to make the player decisions together. Instead, what followed was Snyder doing the same thing he did before, controlling decisions that were not his to control. The special treatment that Snyder gave RG3, a quarterback that Shanahan never wanted to draft or coach, caused dysfunction for the team. It may even be the reason why RG3, one of the top draft prospects of the past decade, had such a stifling short career. Although you cannot directly blame Snyder for RG3's plenteous injuries, the way the situation was mishandled led to confusion and a terrible situation for such a young quarterback to be in. Shanahan was fired from Washington because he could not deal with Snyder getting so involved where he shouldn't. As time went on with Jay Gruden and then Ron Rivera, no matter the coach or even the players, things stayed the same in Washington. Gruden said, "Every year that I was there, we had a pretty good draft class with a couple exceptions. When it came our time to pick, we'd always talk about the picks, where we'd like to go, what would happen if the player's gone, and did all our scenarios. And then owner Dan Snyder would come in off his yacht and make the pick." I mean, at one point, Washington had Mike Shanahan, a 3-time Super Bowl champ, Kyle Shanahan, the current 49ers head coach, Matt LaFleur, the current Packers head coach, Mike McDaniel, the current Dolphins head coach, Sean McVay, the current Rams head coach and Super Bowl champ, all on the faculty at the same time, 2011 to 2013. And yet they couldn't even win a playoff game. Clearly, no amount of talented coaching staff could win with Snyder at the helm. The success that could have come to Washington during Snyder's time if he had not consistently stepped in the way of his talented coaching staff and faculty will never be known. He gave them offers they couldn't refuse, but situations they wish they had. Besides leading the team to failure on the field, Snyder has simultaneously chased away many fans with his obsessive greed. It's hard to know for sure who exactly in leadership was involved in all these financial scandals we're going to discuss, but in the end, the owner is responsible. On his first day, Snyder said, "I'm not focused on the money, I'm focused on the opportunity and the dream." But his actions did not support his words. He quickly added 10,000 seats to the stadium to give it the largest capacity in the NFL, and pumped up revenue by making premium seats and letting fans leapfrog the waiting list by paying $7,500. Those same seats he ended up removing from the stadium 10 years later to create some artificial demand by lowering the supply. In 2000, Snyder became the first NFL team to charge fans for entrance into training camp. Shortly after Snyder became the owner, the team lobbied the Prince George's County authorities to authorize a ban on all pedestrians from entering the grounds of the stadium. Since there was basically no public transport to the games, this ban meant that fans had no choice but to drive and park in Snyder's parking lots. With the pedestrian ban and parking monopoly, Snyder hiked the parking rates up from $10 to $25. The team has been caught using fans' security deposits illegally, keeping the money for longer than they should. Attorney General Brian Schwab said, rather than being transparent and upfront in their ticket sales practices, the Commanders unlawfully took advantage of their fan base, holding on to security deposits instead of returning them. From saying he would never change the team's name to changing it in a heartbeat once threatened to lose an $8 million contract with FedEx, clearly all it took was a pinch in the checkbook to get Snyder to go back on his word. Some of Snyder's partners reported quite a few financial moves made by him without proper approval. For example, Snyder had leased his personal jet back to the team. He also had arranged for the franchise to pay him a total of $4.5 million for having the team logo placed on his personal jet. Snyder called it an advertising fee. Whether or not it provided any meaningful advertisement for the team, either way, the millions Snyder paid himself were not approved by his partners. With all this put together, Snyder's pattern of deceptive use of funds cannot be overlooked. Still, this is not the extent of Snyder's illegal and unethical business transactions. Most recently, he was sued $60 million by the NFL for mismanagement of funds and withholding the NFL's fair share of ticket sales. I won't make a comprehensive list, but I'll share now the story that I found to be the most heart-wrenching. The story of Pat Hill. Hill was a longtime Redskin fan who held season tickets since the 1960s. Her house was decorated top to bottom with Redskins pillows, blankets, rugs, and even music boxes. As a realtor, she was making a killing in the expensive area of Fairfax County, Virginia. But then, in 2008, the housing market came crashing down, and so did Pat's earnings. With hard economic times, she couldn't afford her $5,300 a year season tickets. She asked that they would waive her contract for a year or two, just until she could get back on her feet. Instead of hearing her plea for help during this economic crisis, the Washington Redskins sued Pat Hill for violating her contract and being unable to pay. Well, she couldn't afford a lawyer, and she didn't fight the charge because of her biblical belief that it's wrong to not pay one's debts. The team won a $66,364 default for her case. The Washington Post reports her saying in an interview, "It really breaks my heart," her voice cracking as the tears well and spill. "I don't even believe in bankruptcy. We are supposed to pay our bills. I ain't trying to get out of anything." 125 fans, just like Pat, were also sued by the team for a total amounting $3.6 million. What the team did was not illegal. These people were unable to pay their contracted amount. But it doesn't seem right to abuse the most dedicated fans by taking their money in court during the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, all while there were still plenty of people in line willing to pay for these season tickets. So who is to blame for the once most attended team in the NFL becoming now the least attended? Could it be the man who has turned the Washington experience into seeing a game with poor play but expensive costs? Not having fans in the stands has a big effect on team performance. Just ask any NFL player who has tried to play in the booming sound of stadiums reaching decibel levels over 140, the equivalent of a jet engine taking off.
When I'm playing in a home game and when we're playing in a home game, you see more Eagles fans and Cowboys fans. I mean, home field advantage is a real thing. And, you know, people always talk about Philadelphia. People always talk about all these other teams. They forget how crazy of a home field advantage the Redskins' former team used to have. So
it's just not the same playing in a stadium that's half empty, especially when the few seats that are taken are rooting for the other team. Now, for much of Snyder's time, attendance did stay high. In 2008, Washington was ranked first in average attendance. But I would credit this more to the fans than to Snyder. The fans of Washington are resilient, but slowly they started to realize major issues and they slowly fizzled out. Who would want to fatten Snyder's wallet with their hard-earned money for a lousy performance at a stadium that, I forgot to mention, is falling apart? In 2022, during a game with the Philadelphia Eagles, a railing gave way, causing some fans to fall 5 to 10 feet to the concrete and on top of the Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts. These fans sued for alleged injuries they sustained. It's one thing to just be an incompetent football owner, make poor player acquisitions and poor team structure decisions. It is an entirely different and arguably worse thing to steal from your fans, not only their money, but their hope. For the first years, we thought the extent of Snyder's damage was limited to the on-field results of the team. Then we eventually saw how he was involved in financial scandals. Sadly, his poor actions did not end at the team's losing record or at his hunger for money and power. It spills over to an area that I'd rather not talk about because of how unsettling it is. But if it was left unsaid, it would leave a gaping hole in this video. And that's the topic of sexual allegations and workplace violations during Snyder's ownership. On May 2nd, 2018, the New York Times published a report on cheerleaders from a 2013 trip to Costa Rica. This was the first time anything major was made known to the public about the team's workplace toxicity. Basically, in 2013, the Redskins cheerleaders flew to a secluded resort in Costa Rica for a calendar photo shoot. This was normal, but their passports were confiscated, and they would work 14-hour days making compromising poses. This wasn't the biggest concern of the cheerleaders, though. It was the fact that the Redskins had invited spectators to watch the cheerleaders' photo shoot. Some suite holders had been granted an up-close, behind-the-scenes view. On top of that, some of the cheerleaders were picked by these onlookers to go out as escorts to a nightclub. They were not asked, they were told. And although some of the cheerleaders reported it being a pretty fun night out, and it didn't include any sexual acts, it is unnerving that they were treated this way. This is by no means part of their job as cheerleaders, especially when their pay at the time was about $1,000 a year. This almost selling of up-close contact with the cheerleaders was personally advocated for years by Dan Snyder, said Mr. Pocken, who from 2001 to 2006 was the organization's chief operating officer. This was not a one-time thing. Then, in the summer of 2020, 2 articles published by the Washington Post told the story of former female employees who reported sexual harassment while working at the Commanders. Some directly about Snyder's conduct, but a lot accusing other executives. After several allegations were made about the workplace, the Commanders hired Beth Wilkinson to conduct an investigation in August 2020. At the end of her investigation and findings, the NFL decided that a spoken report would be sufficient and no written report was ever released. Congress asked the NFL to release its findings, but after the NFL refused, the United States House of Representatives conducted their own year-long investigation. And in December 2022, they released their findings in a 79-page document. The document goes over some of the findings of the Wilkinson case and dives into the allegations made against the Commanders. What they found was disturbing. Tiffany Johnston, who was a former marketing employee and cheerleader, stated that she had been sexually harassed 50 to 100 different times while being an employee in Washington. Not all occurrences were Snyder. but she accused Snyder of putting his hand on her leg under the table at a team dinner and trying to force her into his limousine. His aggressive behavior was only stopped by his attorney. Another former cheerleader, Elaine Coburn, testified that during auditions one year,
Dan Snyder ordered the director of the squad to parade the ladies onto the field while he and his friends gawked from his suite through binoculars. The women were directed to turn around slowly, as if they were cattle being examined for sale. One of the women cried on the sidelines because she didn't understand what was happening.
She also stated that a majority of the female employees were exploited and harassed, ranging from sexual objectification comments to other uncomfortable situations. On one occasion, a female employee allegedly was groped by one of the coaching staff. When Mr. David Pauken informed Dan Snyder about the situation, no action was taken. Instead, the request was for the assaulted female employee to just stay away from that coach. At least 25 women have voiced their allegations of sexual harassment while working for the team. In 2008, and allegedly at the request of Snyder, a special project was made to, quote, get the good bits of a behind-the-scenes video from a cheerleader photo shoot. These video clips strung together, which featured partial nudity, were not only extremely revealing, but also filmed without any consent from the women. The 10-minute outtakes video was created June 9th, 2008, according to metadata in the video file. A technical analysis by the Post and a researcher from the Infomedia Labs at Carnegie Mellon University found no evidence that had been manipulated. The even scarier part was that there was not only one video, but two. A very similar video was made in 2010. Both videos shared the same soundtrack, the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash, Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion, and U2's Mysterious Ways. It makes you wonder just how many of these videos might have been created. Snyder has denied any knowledge of these videos. In an official statement from Snyder in response to the public outrage of these lewd videos, he said, "While I was unaware of these allegations until they surfaced in the media, I take full responsibility for the culture of the organization." Snyder also said, "I have admittedly been too hands-off as an owner and have allowed others to have day-to-day control to the detriment of our organization. Going forward, I am going to be more involved, and we have already made major changes in personnel, bringing in new leadership to drive the cultural transformation on and off the field." Any employee would tell you that he was already hands-on and involved in the minute details of every decision, from coaching, hiring, player selection, to money decisions. He is anything but hands-off. Bruce Allen, who was team president from 2009 to 2019, quoted Snyder for saying, "I want to know everything. Don't let me find out about it." At the start of the investigation, he said, Beth Wilkinson and her firm are empowered to do a full, unbiased investigation. But as the investigation proceeded, his so-called commitment to the unbiased investigation appeared to be weaker than his stadium rails. Instead, Snyder hired a counter-investigator to see who of his employees would divulge information. Several employees reported being followed by his private investigators. He used non-disclosure agreements to stifle what employees could say and refused to release them from their agreements. During this investigation, one important character was Bruce Allen, who Snyder used as a scapegoat. In October of 2021, the New York Times published many misogynistic and homophobic emails shared between Allen and another NFL coach at the time, John Gruden. These emails, it turned out, had actually been released by Snyder and his lawyers in a case against Bruce in 2019. Snyder had used these emails several times to throw Allen under the bus as the culprit for the Commanders' culture.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
I would agree that Allen is partially responsible, but this does not relieve Snyder one bit. Snyder's lawyers sent Allen these threatening emails before he appeared at trial to try and keep him from implicating Snyder. These threatening means were used by Snyder more than once. Snyder's lawyers also released potentially unflattering documents and emails from accounts of other employees too, including Coburn, who I mentioned earlier, and Donna Wells. They were also offered financial compensation if they agreed to stop talking during the Wilkinson investigation. On top of this, during Congress's investigation, Snyder refused several times to appear in court and give his account. He hid on his yacht. If someone else really was responsible for the team's culture, now was the time to make it known. Now was the time to show evidence. Eventually, he did appear in court, but instead of giving any substantial argument or evidence for the team's workplace issues, he just denied knowledge of any of the facts. He testified over 100 times that he did not know or didn't remember basic facts about the investigation and the team. The Commanders even prevented Congress's access to over 40,000 documents over the course of the investigation. Snyder's attempt to cover everything up, blame others, intimidate witnesses, and then claim that he had no idea of anything eventually proved futile. Wilkinson still determined that bullying and intimidation, sexual harassment, and a culture of fear pervaded the Commanders' organization for many years, and that senior executives not only failed to stop it, but engaged in inappropriate conduct themselves. Imagine what would be found if these investigations were not hindered by Snyder and his lawyers. Real harm was done to these employees, and that affects the club as a whole. The abuse, assault, and toxicity flows over to the players, the scoreboard, and eventually the fans. It has caused an unnecessary weight on the players and coaches. The morale of the team has been low throughout these troubling years of Snyder's ownership. Now, I hate to make him out as the lone villain responsible for the workplace. Certainly others helped form this culture. But Snyder not only allowed it, but actively participated in this toxic culture. And sure, it's possible some of these allegations are not completely accurate. One can hope that some of these women were not actually harmed, but to have all of these allegations be false is nearly impossible. It's hard to find much good about Snyder. Most people just don't like him. Nothing supports the idea that he isn't to blame for the state of the team. But I thought I should mention a bit of the good that he did. For example, on the team website when he was still owner, his bio talked predominantly about his philanthropic activities, probably because there wasn't much else to talk about during his tenure at Washington. Of the 23 paragraphs in his bio, there was only one about football, and the rest flaunted his charitable donations and business world success. But he created the Washington Charitable Foundation in 2000. One of the first things he did after purchasing the team. He supported children's literacy efforts, installing laundry facilities in schools and nonprofit organizations, helping in the Caribbean after Hurricane Matthew in the fall of 2016, supporting the Children's National Hospital and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. These are all very honorable and wonderful things, and the donations when added up equate to over $29 million. As for the players, there have been some truly great ones that have come through during the reign of Snyder. LeVar Arrington, Santana Moss, Chris Samuels, Sean Taylor, may he rest in peace, Clinton Portis, Brian Orakpo, London Fletcher, Ryan Kerrigan, and you have to give it to him, Robert Griffin III. It was a hopeful season, at least, until it wasn't. Alfred Morris, Trent Williams, Jordan Reed, Kirk Cousins, Chase Young, Terry McLaurin, and Jonathan Allen. But here's the thing. Even a monkey throwing darts, given enough chances, will hit the bullseye a few times. Unfortunately, Snyder made too many mistakes, all while being unqualified, incompetent, and incapable of running an NFL team. He overstepped his domain many times, making decisions that he should have left to his hired professionals. He created a toxic workplace that not only repelled talent and stifled the team's progress, but actually harmed individuals. And through all of this, he kept his eye focused on his checkbook, doing anything to increase profits, even illegal and unethical actions that have only chased away a large amount of the fan base and left many in dire economic circumstances. When it was announced that Snyder was planning on selling to Josh Harris and his organization, Gibbs made a public statement. He explains that he had the opportunity to get to know Josh Harris and the leadership team during the process, that with great leadership from the top, the drive to win on the field, and a commitment to culture, championship teams are created, and that he is committed to doing what he can to reconnect this great franchise to the community, fan base, and alumni. He doesn't mention Snyder. Instead, he notes that there is a need to reconnect the team with those who have faithfully supported it in the past. With that said, I think he did sincerely want the team to succeed. He's poured millions of his own personal funds into the team, but to no avail.
5 years, haven't made the playoffs. This is not going to work. And you get that, so how do we fix this thing? I said, well, I could fix that. I could fix it. I could fix a business. I could fix issues.
No marketing scheme or business idea, no matter how good, can win a Super Bowl. He was just a fan who seized on the opportunity to become the head of his childhood sports team, not realizing exactly what he had signed up for. He wanted to make his dad proud and build a winning franchise, one that he no longer had to watch from the television stores, but from the owner's box. The team had become a way for Snyder to memorialize and honor his father. Even before every home game, Snyder would stop by his father's grave. But it doesn't matter how badly someone wants to win or how much someone wants to make their dad proud if the results never come. It seemed the more he got involved, the worse things got. Everything he touched was cursed. Instead of becoming Washington's saving grace, Snyder has become Washington's greatest sin. A blotch in the team history that will take who knows how long to fully clean out. I tried for so long not to get my hopes up too much until the sale was official. No gimmicks, no fake-outs. I needed to see the deal signed and done. I really never thought that day would come that Snyder, one of the youngest NFL owners, would ever sell. It seemed like for the rest of my life I would be consigned to a state of misery with the Commanders, or just give up on the team and try to forget about football. Then that fateful day came, July 20th, 2023.
The Commanders have officially been sold.
Yeah, that's right. NFL owners just voted to seal the deal roughly 10 minutes ago.
Dan Snyder, as of today, he's selling the team. What do you think?
Great! Great! I'm loving it.
Washington fans are known for holding out hope year after year. But this time, it really feels different. I started work on this essay quite a few months ago, and at this point I was gonna say something like, we can hope that the fans will return or something, but the truth is, the fans are already returning in full force.
Just getting rid of what we got rid of, just a big weight, don't want to talk about that, it's negative, it's all positive. Redskins are back. I haven't been in the stadium for 20 years. Say, yeah, baby.
I am shocked with how quickly the fan base is returning to pep rallies, training camps, and other team events. But that's because I've never lived to experience what this fan base is truly capable of. The fans are the reason this team sold for a record-smashing $6 billion, the most of any sports team ever. Not because of anything that Snyder did to add value, but because of the fan base that everyone knows will come pouring back into those stands and support this team full-fledged. I mean, the DC Defenders and XFL spring football team were nearly selling out tickets this year. DC is hungry for good football. There's energy in the air. Washington is alive.
It's a big deal to have you folks back here. It means a lot.
Oh, it feels electric out here. So I ain't never seen this place packed like this, so it's gonna be a fun year.
I feel good, man. I'm energized, man.
This is awesome. Energy's fun to be able to play in front of them, so can't wait to get those games going, have them out.
Are you surprised?
It's so much more energy.
It's exciting. It's electric.
Let's go. We all excited.
How much people are just really excited.
How much you love this energy out here?
I love it, man. You see where I'm at. You see where I'm at. Videos, I'm high-fiving. It's hope and excitement, man. Look at all these people who are out here today, man, on a Friday, man. You've been waiting for this for 24 years, man.
The fans and the employees alike are ecstatic, and they finally have hope again.
I'm just ecstatic. I'm happy. The Commanders, we back up.
Back up, baby.
You know, new life, we back up. That hope, what was taken from us from all those years, is back. We have that hope back to be winners. Now we can go in the season with hope knowing that we can win.